Set in the city of Vancouver, British Columbia on Friday. The story begins by introducing a man and father named Eddie, who is redeeming his car at a repair shop. However, because he doesn't have enough money, Eddie can't get his car B back. At that time, Eddie received a call from his wife who had actually been separated for 2 years. His wife asked Eddie to pick up their daughter Sarah from school. Because for a week, Eddie kept breaking his promise, which made their daughter have to go home alone with her scooter. When he was about to leave, Eddie accidentally saw a wallet lying around belonging to one of the employees at the repair shop. As someone who has lived on the streets for a long time, Eddie cleverly provoked a little commotion in order to get the wallet. Eddie couldn't get much from the wallet he had just stolen. He immediately went to the shop to buy a drink and bought 3 lottery tickets, hoping to get lucky. Because his car is very important and is the only vehicle he has to pick up his daughter from school, Eddie keeps wandering around looking for opportunities to get money. Stealing is the only quickest way he can do now. So Eddie starts to approach one by one the cars left in the parking lot, hoping that one of them forgot to lock their vehicle. He tries to open one of the cars, but suddenly he is surprised by a dog inside. Not long after, his daughter Sarah called to inform him that she had arrived home. Even though her parents had separated and Eddie often broke promises, Sarah still loved her father sincerely.
I still love you, even when you're acting like a farthead.
I still love you, and I still love you.
That's when Eddie accidentally saw a luxury SUV parked alone. Eddie began to observe and found that the car had a rare brand called Dolus. Strangely, such a luxurious car was unlocked, which allowed Eddie to freely enter. Eddie immediately looked for valuables that could be sold, but all he found were sunglasses that were worthless or not. When Eddie was about to leave, suddenly his car was mysteriously locked. Eddie immediately panicked and started kicking his car window. While Eddie was still trying to open his car door, a call came from someone who might be the owner of this car. What Eddie didn't realize was that in every corner of the car there was a small surveillance camera that was directly connected to someone. Eddie, who only wanted to leave quickly, remained focused on finding a way out and kept trying to hit his car window with a crowbar. But because the car window was difficult to break, Eddie broke open the door to find a gap inside. But his hand had to be injured by it. And what he found was something surprising. It turned out that the entire part of the car was covered in thick steel that was impossible to break with bare hands. He kept trying to hit the bottom of the car until he finally gave up and decided to pick up the phone that had been ringing.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, jolly good. My name is William. I'm the owner of this car.
It turned out that the person who called was the car owner named William, who was currently watching Eddie from a distance. Instead of apologizing and admitting his mistake, Eddie cursed and uttered harsh words so that something surprising happened.
Yeah, it's short for go f yourself.
Interesting point.
Unexpectedly, the interior of this car was equipped with a fairly strong electric shock, so that Eddie, who was increasingly annoyed, immediately took a gun that was in his bag, and this is what he did. Eddie, who did not realize that his car windows were bulletproof, was finally injured by his own behavior. William also explained that this car was specially designed with bulletproof walls and glass, signal blockers, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and so on, and a layer of car glass that prevents outsiders from seeing inside.
Help! Oh, hang on a second.
Help me!
In the midst of the pain and blood that continued to flow, Eddie asked for help so that William would let him go. Eddie surrendered if William wanted to report to the police, as long as he could get medical help immediately. However, William did not pity him at all, and instead let Eddie faint due to starting to lose blood. Long story short, at night, Eddie finally woke up from his fainting with his hands and feet already bandaged. No one knew what time William did it, but Eddie immediately finished his last drink of water and the few snacks he had brought in his bag. The next day, on Saturday, Eddie was seen sitting while enjoying his VAP, where William called again, this time speaking directly without Eddie having to pick up the phone. Who knows what William meant by this? He seemed to just need a friend to chat with to tell about his life and his beloved daughter. However, because Eddie was hungry and needed a drink, Eddie cursed and uttered dirty words, making William need to electrocute him again. Because Eddie was unruly and continued to say bad words, William turned on classical music quite loudly and turned on the air conditioner to its absolute limit. Hours in the cold and the music that was played over and over again, Eddie started to go crazy and tried to protect his body temperature, and it continued until nightfall. Eddie finally gave up and apologized for his harsh words. He promised not to do it again. Hearing that, William immediately turned off the air conditioner and the music at that time, which made Eddie feel a little relieved. The next morning, which was Sunday morning, Eddie was seen urinating, which was collected in a plastic bottle. Not wanting to give up on the situation, Eddie tried again to break into the car wall using the L key he found. Not long after, William called to invite a debate about who was right and who was wrong. There, Eddie defended what he did as an impact of the social gap that happened to him. Eddie considered that what he did should be tolerated because the lower middle class was experiencing very heavy economic pressure and had no other choice to survive. In the afternoon approaching night, heavy rain fell accompanied by William, who secretly turned on the heater, which made the temperature in the car very hot. Eddie, who was really tormented by thirst, licked the top glass, which was full of raindrops on the outside. Because he was still thirsty, Eddie almost drank his own urine but was still sane enough not to do it. Taking advantage of Eddie's thirst, William asked for Eddie's social security number or his identity number, on the grounds that he wanted to check whether Eddie had a criminal record or not. Because if it was proven not, then Eddie had the opportunity to be free to get out of this nightmare. With the promise of drinking water and freedom, Eddie finally gave his social security number, so William immediately told him where the bottle of water was.
Very good. I hid the water bottle.
After the temperature returned to normal, Eddie, who was resting, remembered the 3 lottery tickets he had bought. There, Eddie immediately laughed happily when he found out that he had won a jackpot of $500, which was enough to redeem his pawned car. Eddie's happiness did not last long after William called to inform him that Eddie had been proven to have been involved in several petty crimes, such as theft and property break-ins. So the lottery that was in his hands at this time was completely useless because Eddie would never be allowed to get out of the car freely. And in the end, for the sake of his beloved daughter Sarah, Eddie had no choice but to lower his ego by asking William to sympathize and free him. However, William firmly refused to free him, but as an appreciation for his efforts to speak softly and politely, Eddie was entitled to a small cake that had been stored on the front dashboard. He immediately took it and pressed it greedily, but there Eddie accidentally saw a kind of circuit board that had buttons to turn off the entire system of this car. Knowing that, Eddie patiently waited for William not to watch him so that he could freely check the button.
He's gone. He's gone.
After making sure William was not watching him, Eddie quickly took a picture of the button with his cell phone camera, which was indeed the button to turn off the entire system and engine in this car. So very carefully, Eddie started pressing the button.
My heart, man!
Hey, what are you doing down there?
William realized it again and asked Eddie to keep his hand on the camera. And all night until morning, Eddie used his foot to turn off the button. Monday morning arrived, Eddie still couldn't press the button. In the midst of unbearable drowsiness and thirst, Eddie decided to drink his own urine. Long story short, at night, Eddie, who was idly pressing the on-off button, accidentally turned on his car and managed to drive it. At first, Eddie was so happy that he screamed, but William was not a fool who didn't think about things like this. With the remote control, William drove his car who knows where, which made Eddie completely helpless.
Just look at what they've become, Eddie. Addicts, criminals.
Along the way around the streets on the outskirts of the capital, William showed Eddie that there were many unemployed, homeless, addicts, beggars, and homeless people who were considered annoying pests. William had his own views on this and considered that poor people who had no money were a group that deserved to be eliminated.
Whoa.
Have some fun.
After being invited to speed up, which almost made Eddie's heart jump out, William took Eddie to a small alley just as 2 thugs were bullying someone. In accordance with his views on the lower classes, William intended to kill the 2 thugs by crashing his car into them. Although Eddie was a street person who was used to committing crimes, it did not mean that he was a cruel person who could kill someone. So seeing the last thug about to be executed, Eddie begged William not to do it. But William did it cruelly. Finished with the previous action, William again invited Eddie to speed up a building to the top floor. There, Eddie had to feel high adrenaline when his car was about to free fall. But suddenly... Tuesday morning after fainting, Eddie realized that he had been taken to drive to his daughter Sarah's school. This time, William really went too far by involving Sarah in this madness, which Sarah's school address William got from the social security number and identity that Eddie gave. Eddie was really upset when William intended to hit his daughter. There, little Sarah, who was riding a scooter, could only run to avoid being chased by the car. Luckily, Sarah was able to avoid it, But William, who was still not satisfied, turned his car around, leaving Eddie with no other choice but to threaten to shoot himself in the head to end this nightmare. And this is what happened.
Please, don't do it! Wouldn't want to ruin all the...
It turned out that William was only playing a trick on Eddie, and the gun he was holding had been emptied of bullets. So Eddie was shocked by William's plan. After William finished with his unfunny prank, Eddie was taken for a drive around the city while continuing to talk about his personal life. Fed up with all this, Eddie took off his jacket and bit a plastic bottle. Then he pulled out the surveillance cameras one by one while enduring the pain of the electric shocks that continued to shock his body. There, Eddie was so annoyed that he had no choice but to continue to endure the electric shocks so that he would not be watched by William and could get out of the car. Even though William could no longer supervise him, the car could still be controlled remotely. Eddie was taken to a quiet place. It turned out that there was already someone waiting for him, namely,
Hello, Eddie. I'm William.
This is William, who has locked Eddie in the car for 4 days. Eddie tried to resist, but William immediately electrocuted him. Eddie was completely helpless, especially when William told Eddie to tie his hands under the car seat so he couldn't move freely. After Eddie's hands were tied, William got into the car, so we could clearly see William's figure, who turned out to be just an old grandfather who was probably just lonely. William took Eddie's gun and loaded it with bullets in case Eddie rebelled again. He also mocked Eddie by calling him an amateur thief. Not only did he mock Eddie as an amateur thief with an empty brain, William also teased Eddie by eating jelly candy right in front of his face. Although in the end, Eddie was given some of the jelly candy to eat himself with his mouth.
Some gummy bears. Yummy. Try them. Off they go.
Who knows where William will take him? Eddie secretly observes the surroundings and sees a hammer in the back. Not only that, Eddie also realized that William was wearing a woman's bracelet. So Eddie had a brilliant plan to escape this nightmare.
Taste of hell.
That's a nice bracelet.
Continuing William's story about his personal life having a daughter, Eddie finally realized that William was a father figure who had lost his beloved daughter, and what he was doing now might be a form of revenge for her death. So Eddie deliberately provoked William's anger by talking about his beloved daughter.
Charm bracelet.
Sorry about that, Eddie.
In a condition where his nose was bleeding because William deliberately braked suddenly, Eddie was still able to concentrate by secretly using his foot to press the system control button. To buy a little time, Eddie managed to lure William into telling about the chronology of his daughter's death. It turned out that William once had a teenage daughter. Until one night, there were some criminals who broke into his house. With his own eyes, William witnessed how his daughter was shot dead by one of the criminals. So since then, William has had a grudge of hatred towards poor people like Eddie, who are considered only viruses that deserve to be eliminated.
We're having fun now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on, please.
When the system button was almost turned off, Eddie deliberately said that William was just a weak human being who used his daughter's name to kill people, acting like a hero who hunts criminals. In fact, William is just a lonely old man who is unable to accept the reality of life. So William, who was furious, quickly took a gun.
You. That's the joke.
The car plunged into the ravine with one bullet that actually hit William himself. Before William regained consciousness, Eddie quickly untied his hands and immediately beat William's face until it was black and blue. Realizing that his car was going to explode, Eddie quickly took a hammer and tried to break the rear window that had previously been cracked by the bullet until he managed to survive the explosion. With the lottery prize still saved, Eddie also hitched a ride with one of the passing drivers and went straight to the repair shop to redeem his pawned car. Because the workshop owner was too slow in serving customers, Eddie, who was impatient, finally chose to buy a children's bicycle until he finally managed to arrive on time to pick up his daughter Sarah from school. Finally, Eddie realized that his only child was the most beautiful gift he had at this time and could not be replaced by anything. And this film... end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Amri Film channel so you don't miss the next movie recaps.